Good afternoon. So it's a very daunting task to speak to such a multidisciplinary audience and so many faces who really know so many things about so many subjects. Uh, what you will find very interesting is carbon. Carbon is a very important molecule. When the universe, the entire thing was made very early. From beryllium, the carbon came. After that, no more carbon really was created. Then, in the earth, the origin of life came, and the organic molecules, the backbone was carbon. And at some stage, from a non living earth, very high fixation of carbon dioxide, you know, and all those vegetation which actually became the coal and petroleum, the CO2 decreased, that is around 600 million years ago, and all what you get, coal, petroleum, etc., is from that early photosynthesis. Now the most interesting part of the carbon is, after so many hundreds of million years, the human beings have started harvesting that carbon, burning it for energy, and putting it back in the atmosphere. So this story covers the earth as a system. Then we will move to India. We will look at remote sensing, one of the new technologies. So I have some introductory slides of what it means. And then how do we really create, like a accountant, input and output and balance the carbon. Unfortunately, our books are messy. We are not able to balance the carbon. So this is in nutshell. And all this then brings up the international relations, nations, policies, and lot of diplomacy, where science takes backseat and lot of posturing is done for things like stop burning coal, zero nitrogen, zero CO2, total neutrality, something which I think are those fads which will pass at some time. So I would really like to stress on how humans have modified the carbon cycle, and how our group, or me, at first Space Application Center, then at Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, Dehradun, then at National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad, and now at National Institute of Advanced Studies. For over 35 years, I have spent some effort in trying to understand various facets. But I will not go back in history. I will be touching recent results mostly. So what we would really like to tell is, what is the centrality of carbon dioxide in climate change? All climate change, all global change, all things like more rainfall, high temperature, the root cause, or the 50%, is attributed to increased CO2 in atmosphere. That CO2 in atmosphere, as I explained to you, is just because we go on mining the coal and petroleum, which is there from hundreds of million years, and put it back in the atmosphere. So the biogeochemical cycle, there is a biological component, there is a geological component, and there is cycling, right? That's why it's called biogeochemical cycle. And carbon has two cycles: a geologic cycle, which runs into millions of years, and a rapid cycle, which is like a decade to century scale. So this, what is being put out, will really take hundreds of years to really get absorbed. So this mismatch between rapid and slow cycle creates this imbalance. Okay. So human activities of greenhouse gas emissions, energy use is the first one, as I said, but in parallel, to a small measure, the human beings, since they became from hunter gatherers to settlers, have modified the surface of the earth. This modification itself leads to release of carbon. stored carbon from soil and vegetation. And it's very difficult to quantify. We will cover that. So that is the land transformation. Now the tool available with us is remote sensing. What is remote sensing? Remote sensing means you put a sensor in space or somewhere which is away from the object or the phenomena which you are studying. You are all used to using a scale. You also measure your temperature by generally putting a thermometer, right? But in remote sensing is like a photography. You go away, as much away that you can be 900 kilometer away, which is the space, and from the sensors you will derive its property. I'll explain to you land monitoring. It can be used for many purposes, but we won't spend time on other application. Now, because of this challenge of increasing CO2, which will be covered in first two sections, the human beings, as an international collaborative effort, they created a United Nations framework for climate change, UNFCCC, and then it sets up a technical body called Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and IPCC then advises nations, please tell us what you are doing to your carbon or what you are going to do. So you must be reading a lot of things about COP and ho-halla, right? Sometime they go to Paris, sometime they go to all nice places, Marrakesh and whatnot, and spend 15 days and huge thousands of people and so many flights, and also release so much CO2 to control CO2. So we will go to that. So human response, what are the instruments, what are the negotiated policies? Now nations have politics, capacity and science. Unfortunately, all nations are not equal. Even we cannot be equal in every aspect. So our small effort has been to improve our capability to do carbon science. That's what I will try to convey. Then we will come to the results. Spatial assessment and modeling at 10 to 100 year of the Indian terrestrial carbon cycle. So as I explained to you, my all co-workers and colleagues at SAC, IIRS and NRSC, funding was by the ISRO Geosphere Biosphere program, and currently at NIAS. I acknowledge at the very beginning I am speaking, but they have put in a lot of hard work. And then what could be the way ahead? And I will bring in history, I will bring in land settlement, I will also bring in the rules of the forest and dispossession of the tribals, and as such thing as colonial as setting up of the railways. In fact, this carbon story is so interesting that it touches almost every discipline. So I am sure all of you will find some small window of opening to think carbon. Of course, and we all must think carbon in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. So there is a, you have a sort of commitment as a human being, and also as a serious student of whatever discipline, you have a window of opening of understanding carbon through that window also. So first I will tell the increase of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, from where it is measured, how it is measured, and what has happened over last 8 lakh years. And then we will come to the energy use. Then of the CO2 released, what remains in the atmosphere. So there are two ways of solving this balance when there is a humidity, how much warm it is. So water vapor is a very big greenhouse, but since it continuously gets absorbed, etc., it is never taken as an anthropogenic. Anyway, we have 60-70% of water surface, and so we only take the gases which alter it. So this 47% is the cause, and this 31% which goes to land, unfortunately, we cannot in a distributed sense demonstrate, other than there is a greening, other than there can be more wood, other than there can be more, photosynthesis because of nitrogen and irrigation in agriculture land and more soil carbon. But the exact quantification is not important. Why quantification? Till now we have looked carbon as a globe, But when you want to take action, right, then the humanity gets divided by the boundaries called countries. When the countries come into play, then I to blame, you to blame, you are bigger culprit, I am less culprit. So those things start, and the budget imbalance is of the order of 1.6. Basically, it's around 400 teragram, 0.4 petagram of carbon, which we still are not able to balance. So there could be unknown things. Now, it is obvious that this is a progressive yearly phenomena. My current measurement do not tell the whole story. I should go back. So generally, the northern developed people, they think 1850 is the start of industrial age, right? And they always want to start from 1850. Fine. They think, let us also, for the time being, not argue on that. So if you try to do from 1850, so this curve, top curve, plus side is what is being released to the atmosphere, land use and fossil carbon. Fossil carbon was first coal, then petroleum, then the natural gas. Now you can add shale also, shale oil. And what happens negative is what it's absorbed back. So ocean sink, land sink, and remaining in the atmosphere. Now, if you add the upper two line and check the lower line, these two sums do not match to this part. You understand? This gray line, are you able to see, visualize? So even as a long-term consistent time series, we are not able to, even with the best of our models and understanding, balance the carbon cycle. So we need to do more disaggregated work. If you want to look at India, unfortunately, or historical reason, most of our energy comes from coal, which is still growing at 2.8%. Oil, which we have to all import, grows at 0.5% per year. Natural gas at 1.8%. Nuclear, I hope there will be some improvement, hasn't been much. Hydro has become more static, and the renewables is the one which is growing at 13%, because nation has put 200 gigawatt, and of course PM spoke last week of by 2040 or 2047 making it 500 gigawatt of power by the renewable. So mostly it is wind and solar radiation, right? So this is, and without energy we can't progress, we can't live as a human society with so many functions, right? So this is our scenario. We move on to our large number, which is like third or fourth largest currently, and which brings in lot of pressure from European Union, as they will not import unless you say a forest has not been impacted. They will not allow you any import unless you meet this condition. They forget that if you look at this entire thing, it is they who have done 90% of the pollution, right? So you use the current numbers to put additional restrictions of economic nature on nations who cannot who have still aspiration to economically advance. You can really look at EU numbers, USA numbers. China is the one which did first. Of course, UK have done better. Japan is maintaining. So what you do is, there is a term called energy intensity. For each GDP, $1 million GDP, how much carbon you consume. So now the idea is to have this efficiency term to improve have the lower number for GDP energy intensity. Okay, so this gives you the historical context, not the current one. So now we know the challenge. We know we are now every year or every 2 years going to COP, IPCC, fighting, doing ho-halla, agreeing to disagree, right? So then where is the science? So for doing science, My total research career has been on use of satellite. Incidentally, I am a botanist at graduate level. I am a plant physiologist at master's and PhD level. And next 38 years, I was a remote sensing person, Earth observation. So I'm not sure where I belong to. So what are the capabilities of remote sensing? How do you measure land transformation? And then future missions will be there, and there will obviously be a mission for biomass mapping, which we will not touch. But the first two things are the one for those of you who are from other disciplines or undergraduate people, not yet. We all see Chandrayaan, we all see launcher, but very rarely we look at the satellite and what it does. So beyond the glamorous part of a launch vehicle and landing on moon, let us look at what these small sensors in space do. So what happened in between First and Second World War, photography started. Before that, remote sensing was done by tying a small camera to pigeons, but it wasn't very useful. So it was used more. Then the space photography came on rocket, but rocket can only take a oblique photograph. So then came the 1957 Sputnik. Then Americans developed a program of high resolution photography called Corona, and civilian remote sensing started on 27 July 1972 by the launch of a satellite called ERTS, Earth Resources Technology Satellite, by NASA. And once it was placed, it was called Landsat 1. Now from that time onward, there has always been a Landsat in space taking photographs, right? So we have more than 5 decades of space photograph. Then later on came the microwave sensor, and now there are private people, including lot of Indian startups. I'm not sure if you read the startup thing, you would see Pixel, you will see Digital Eye, and lot of Kshitij and Suhas Singh and lot of Indian names who are making commercial satellite. But incidentally, the Planet Labs, which is a private company, it killed the, it put the entire thing upside down. It launched a mini satellite of 50 kg, and there are 200 of them. So every day at multiple time you can image Earth. They actually collect 14.5 million images per day. They collect so much data that if you don't analyze, which obviously they are not able to do, next day you get more data. So we have moved from no observation to so much this pipe is overflowing that we really are all sunk and dunked in the observation parameter. That's why you need analytics, you need AI. Lot of things which are being talked about are very, very necessary. Okay, so remote sensing is not just putting a camera. You can have multiple bands, and you can have so much band as a spectrometer. All physics and chemistry people, please read the DU5 spectrophotometer, the largest instrument used globally for all. Then you can have SAR or radar, where you send in a microwave and which will get reflected back, and then as you move you collect it and then compute it as an artificial long antenna. Why it is synthetic aperture? Because the resolution depends upon the size of the antenna. Larger the antenna, which you can't launch, but if you can throw a signal and as you move collect the returns many times, it is a synthetic long antenna. That's why it's called SAR. SAR X band can give you resolutions of 1 meter. Many have between 5 and 10. Then you have LIDAR. Same way you can do for light. LIDAR can be, if you use green band, you will measure the atmosphere. If you use red and NIR, you will see the surface. Then any object, if you have now remember your atomic structure and your physics, you will see there are vibrations, all vibrations of atoms and linkages, energy goes up and down. this energy comes back as an emission which you can measure in passive microwave. In fact, the entire space outside also has a background microwave emission, which is used in cosmology, right? Then you have a radar altimetry. The most important thing is limb sounding. Now, if you look at Earth and you look at sun, as it comes up or goes down, and you see through the atmosphere, you can at different heights of the atmosphere get the chemical constituent of the atmosphere. Then you have microwave ranging, another very interesting aspect, where what you do, you have two bodies, heavy bodies, which can measure the distance in millimeter. So as it moves, the first one, if it absorbs, if it is more gravity, it will get pulled down. So there will be a speeding up. Follow, the previous one will not have. Now this gravity anomaly is caused by, you all know moon tides, but it is also caused by snow, rainfall, by flooding, and so many other phenomena. So that is called the gravity anomaly. You can measure the sun outside the earth, and you can send a signal to the ocean and get the backscatter because of the ocean wave. And from the wave energy, you actually know how much wind is flowing. Now the entire dynamics of the earth and atmosphere is controlled by winds. So, and there are no measurement other than satellite to map the entire wind structure of the globe. So these are some of the techniques, and there are even more. So obviously then remote sensing is a very, very powerful tool. So what happens to vegetation? Let us come to land. Now if you are in the visible, you can see the index which will allow you to measure leaf area or canopy. If you really have a in the NIR, but very narrow, you can measure in Fraunhofer line the reflectance, which will give the fluorescence. Many of you would have studied photosynthesis, right? So in photosynthesis, once the light gets absorbed, electron moves from PS2 to PS1 and goes to the H proton movement across a membrane, and you get a chemical reaction. The one which does not do H plus, it comes back as a energy which is called fluorescence. Now if you measure fluorescence, it means the inefficiency of the photosynthetic system is measured by fluorescence. That is what the SIF does. Then if you measure the temperatures, you can measure the evapotranspiration, right? So when the stomata are open, water goes out of the leaf and leaf cools. You can see that. When you are in microwave, you can measure radar canopy. And if you have longer wavelength, you can go through the vegetation and look at the total stem and that. So you can roughly see, you can characterize every aspect of a vegetation canopy. Now once you have the data, you have two ways of looking at it. One way is to look to identify the object. The second is to quantitatively find a parameter, a geophysical parameter. So there are two ways, what is called forward modeling and inverse modeling. So in forward modeling, what you do is you have a measurement of the system and you have measurement of the characteristics. You try to create an empirical model. In an inversion model, you have a radiative transfer model of soil, canopy and atmosphere. You compute a theoretical reflectance and then you invert it back to derive the canopy characteristics. That's called a model inversion. So these are the two broad ways. The third broad method is called discrimination, which is a statistical classification or clustering, or a Mahalanobis distance for all statistics people. You classify the object into various. Now since we are talking of the forest, look at that picture. It tells you over different seasons forests behave separately. We can map the forest. The Forest Survey of India maps every 2 years the entire country. We can with high resolution look at trees outside forest. We can have type of vegetation. We can create a sampling frame. Because you are spatially looking at, you know how to create a better sample. You can look at biomass, fire, and you can manage the wildlife through various things. So there are a lot of parameters which actually go. Now at this stage, we have now enough background. All of you now know remote sensing. This much is sufficient. Now let us now go back to the story of carbon and the human society trying to create a response. In fact, the human society created a very nice response for CFCs and the Montreal Protocol. Once they found there is a ozone hole, they had a thing, they stopped manufacturing, they monitored it, and the hole is going down. But unfortunately, that is not happening because that CFC was controlled at the production stage in the refrigeration. Now CO2 comes from everybody, poor to rich, everybody produces CO2, and so difficult. So here the term what is used is LUCF, land use change. So this land use change and forestry, by removal of the conversion of forest to agriculture or grassland, or affecting the biomass, releases. That is what the IPCC in 1993 said. Then they found out it's not good enough. So in 96, they moved it to LUCF. So there is a land use change and forestry, right? So they found even if you have a forest and you cut the wood and you allow the forest to come back, the classification is forest, but the process of cutting the tree reduces the biomass, releases the soil organic carbon, and there is a net emission. Eventually after 60-80 years there will be absorption, but we don't know whether the species is same or the. So from the LULCF we went to what's called AFOLU. Now it is found that agriculture, because of methane and nitrogen fertilizer N2O, we are doing lot of things. So now they have a huge protocol, but unfortunately what they do is these are all negotiated method. They are not full carbon accounting. So they agree to put this much only. So it is like that you have taken a loan, you go back, then you say I will not pay back, then you say okay, you pay back something, your credit card, okay, so they will say fine, you pay this much money. So this is how the IPCC functions. Every time they meet, they have so many agenda item. They say okay, now this time let us include agriculture, then let us include soil. But full carbon accounting from the very beginning, everything should have been accounted, which is never done. Okay, we will not go into this diplomacy and politics of it. So yes, it is there. So Government of India produces NATCOM, which are called national communications. You have to submit it. We are very good. In fact, we are always in time, and we have submitted 3 NATCOMs. We also submitted, which is called biennial update report, BUR 123, and we also on 8th of December 2023 submitted the 3rd NATCOM, right? Now the mechanics of submitting a report versus what is in the report is what I think I want to draw your attention to. IPCC says, right, we are all their nations, we are not equal. Scientifically it is accepted. So if you don't have any capability, we are giving you some number, you multiply by activity and report that. That's called tier 1 method. The tier 2 method is, in your country, you measure that emission rate and multiply by the activity. So let us say you have rice, you measure methane emission, then you multiply by the rice area, but your emission rate you multiply and tell us. That's called the tier 2, which are called nation specific activity coefficient. The tier 3, which is the truly scientific spatial modeling, India hasn't done it. US does it, Europe does it, some other countries also do it, and maybe at some stage India will also do. Okay, so let us look at, so we are using CS, country specific, some default tier 2. So nation as a whole is still not ready to accept that scientifically we will do full carbon. Forget these numbers, large matrix. I want you to put your attention to the blue and the green numbers. So we have been happily telling them, no, we are very good. It is self-assessment, right? You do self-assess papers and you give yourself A grade. So they are saying, no, our forests are absorbing carbon. You see, in 2000, our number was 223 million tons of CO2 equivalent. You divide by 3.6. So basically, it will come to like 70 teragram carbon per year. And of course, 2019, the last report says, oh, we are so good that we actually absorb 115 million teragrams of carbon in the forest additional. Why do they say so? Because India's forest area is increasing. I will come to that jugglery also. You understood? Good. So now they say, as a scientific method, we have this bookkeeping, we have models which are called dynamic vegetation model. We also have the inverse. So basically, we should be able to add all to have a consistent CO2. This is the scientific way, but we are far from there. So what do we do? The main part is, from wherever you come, you would have seen, or if you have crossed, you have such excellent forests in Western Ghat, Yellapur, etc. You go, you have 60-meter tall trees, or northeast, you have dry deciduous forest, or if you see Rajasthan, you have a dry deciduous forest, hardly 3-meter height. So the FAO allows countries to define your forest in your way. What they say, forest is a tree vegetation with canopy greater than X% and height at maturity of Y meter. So India has adopted, if in 1 hectare, 10% of the 1 hectare, it means out of 10,000 square meter, if only in 1,000 I have the surrounding of the tree canopy, and this tree at maximum, when it will mature, it will exceed 3 meter. This is a forest for me. Good. So we have lot of forest thing. What really happened overall on the globe is that from 10,000 years, from agriculture to now, the forest area decreased by 19%. All this went either to crop or the grazing land, the land degradation, and the animal, they really took up the land. So the natural landscape remained only 14%, 15% is the crop. This is the globe, and of course there is 1% urban here. In fact, in India, now urban is expanding very rapidly. So we will come to such numbers. This is at the globe, and there have been cycles of deforestation and afforestation. It has happened in US Wild West, it has happened in Europe, rapid, then some recovery, then additional rapid, stabilization or no stabilization. Okay, so in India it is very difficult to know what exactly is the forest area. Forest definition I have told to you. The British, who started keeping the forest record, the land which they declared on paper under 3 classes of protected, reserved or unclassified is the forest. It may have tree or not tree, but at that time mostly trees was there because they wanted to make money out of wood, right? That was the Forest Act 1865. There have been many changes, including how to give to the forest dwellers their rights and many other things. So it goes on. So this is, I think, a very important part of multidisciplinary studies on land, tribals and their land rights. Parallelly, the revenue department, so this was forest, the revenue department writes land utilization, so they also have area under forest. See, the government, its own data of the 2 departments does not match. It has never matched actually. I have just tried to plot, not in the colonial, in the independent India. So if our total geographic area is 328 million hectare, the reporting area itself, was very less, something like 294, and then you can see the total geographic area versus the reporting area. It started from 270, and still we are not able to report because of our 328. We have areas of Aksai Chin and the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, where we don't put the statistics, but the land area we claim is 328, and of that the forest area is separately put, but that is on the y2 axis, which is now 70,000. So NRSC produced a report in 1973 that you claim you have 21% of forest, but actual tree cover is only 17%. It created so much ho halla that the forest department said, to beat them, let us join the game. So they said, from now onward, we will every 2-year map the forest. So the FSI, which was called Pre-Investment Forest Survey, PIFSR, became Forest Survey of India, and it started producing the report based on some egging from my earlier colleagues of National Remote Sensing Agency. Okay. Now, if we put all the data of FAO, LULCF, and FSI, their areas still don't match. Sorry, the green one is the, so what they did, they changed the method of scale of mapping from 250 to 50,000, so forest area goes up. It's very simple. If you have large grid and you are measuring forest, you have less area. If you measure more accurately, you have more area. Now, later on to the forest area, they added trees also, called TOF, trees outside forest. So that is still further good. But still at the end, by 1880 or so, we from 100 million hectare have come to around 71 million hectare. So we want to build this strategy. I am very keen as a research group to really compute true forest cover of the India. There most of our effort has gone. So this was one of the early paper we wrote. So Kamaljeet Bangar, he was a PAU student who was doing PhD with Tian, and so we tried to create the increase in the agriculture, increase in the urban forest built up, and he used it for modeling, and we created this. This paper is reasonably well cited. Okay, so if you come to the public space, NGO space, a lot of people have lot of criticism of the FSI forest number. I do not subscribe to them. I'm not endorsing them, but I still say the core issues are definition, the crown cover methodology, and transparency and accessibility. They tell numbers, but they don't allow you to download maps. So if they really want to do that, they have to address those three issues. Okay, so there are, you can go to blogs, and hundreds of blogs will criticize this. So now let us see what we tried to do was, FSI publishes what's called a confusion matrix, change matrix. Every pixel where it was and now where it has moved. So what we tried to do was use this confusion matrix, and then this is the type of matrix. So in 2021 and 19, where very dense pixel, how many square kilometer, they became medium dense or open forest or non-forest. So from such confusion table, we really computed in past 20 years. What exactly is the detail? So you tease out detail, don't look at the final number. Parallelly, what we did was, so if you look at it, it turns out that cumulatively we lost around 2.5 million hectare of forest area. But the point is, it is not lost because you are not looking at what afforestation has been done, and the satellite will start looking it after 3 or 4 years only. Earlier it is only a small sapling, you don't see it as a tree, right? And then the annual emissions. Okay, so there is another, how do you independently do? So there is a Landsat, as I said to you, there is a forest monitoring website of World Resources. So we looked at every 30 meter pixel of 20 years and then counted where, in which 1 kilometer, in which of the 5 year, how much forest has been lost. So this is what is called tree loss. Roughly it corroborates, but the FSI number is higher. This one is slightly lower. Parallelly, to go below, before 2000, then you didn't have satellite data, so you take the topographic surveys, and then you have a challenge of data of two qualities to assimilate. So we looked at 80 years of deforestation, right? And we created number, but with a difference. FSI includes your mango trees, your tea garden, because it is 10% as a forest. We said forest is a forest. Once you create plantations, when you plant trees, this is no longer a forest, it is a managed human ecosystem, right? So we looked at that and we created grids. Some of the major deforestation you can see are in Sonitpur, Navrangpur, and in Andaman, where you can see the reduction in the red areas. Fine. So this is the proof that yes, these are the changes. Parallelly, we expanded it for this century to entire South Asia. After all, if you want to go early, then it was British India. So you need to include Pakistan. Of course, Nepal was always separate, Bangladesh, add Sri Lanka also. So we created the forest cover of South Asia and changes. Parallelly, what happens, one thing happens is forest fires burn the forest. So this is a daily fire, active fire spot for 1 year where the fire took place. But we don't know how much it was burnt. But this is a starting point. Forest fires can be measured by temperature, by smoke, and the burn scar. Very difficult to measure. So this is one particular year. You can see each day, 2014. Of course, we have it for multiple years, but just to give you an idea, the power of the Earth observation, remote sensing, we really did that. Parallelly, what we did is above 50, above 5 hectares, if there is any patch, automatically we detected and counted number of patches around 2600 plus which disappeared. But many of this can be simply harvesting of teak, harvesting of eucalyptus and replanting. So we need data what is called legitimate land diversion. So we looked at this thing. This is a famous Earth Google image. So here mining has been done in Telangana, and you can see all this is forest and there open cast mining. So we tried to look at the record and create the diversion land, and we are now trying to match officially diverted land versus the remote sensing one to see which one are true deforestation. Parallelly, there are other datas to be done. I just bring to you one. We are looking at plantations like tea, coffee. Wood was extracted for shipbuilding, and the railways which started from 1860. So railways, is not only that small patch. Building Indian railways, thousand of, I would say conscripted labor used to live in that open, cut wood, live there and lay down the track. And for initial 15-17 years, wood was the fuel. Only after 1885 or so, the coal became the power source. Of course, now India has the distinction of the largest fraction of our rail engines being electric, much more than even US or whatever, right? But the history is this, we haven't really brought in that. Plus, there were permanent settlements, because to work in the forest, they had to allow people to live there and do agriculture. They were called forest villages. So here we'll try to reconstruct in the Jalpaiguri the tea gardens between 1930 to 2020. So there have been conversion of tea garden to other as well as new tea garden. So the tea area, in fact, we are the second largest tea exporter, right? In fact, once you start growing tea, you affect the forest, because this tea is packed or used to be packed in plywood boxes. and then from there by train carried to Calcutta, auctioned, and by ship go to the London, and then if it went to US, the British wanted more tax, so the US said, we are throwing all your tea into the ocean and we are independent. So tea has a very, very checkered history. I think you should all read the Boston Tea Party. Okay, so now, as of now, in just January of this year, we have put in last 20 years of the forest lost grids and the new plantation grids. We haven't converted them into carbon, but for each one, in each 1 kilometer, fraction of the grid has been done. So now we go to much more tougher thing. At each point, how much is the carbon? So this is the forest biomass density, is a slightly complicated thing. If you have traditional methods, you did like this. But what we did was, we measured at 6,000 places the tree count, height and girth, and did a machine learning model and tried to model at 250 meter the biomass. So this is the biomass map. FSI is still using the physiographic zone mean average. We also did similar for soil also. And the challenge is, if you see the tree, if you saturate the totally, then you have more biomass but no remote sensing response. This is called saturation. For that, unless you measure the height, which now is possible from LiDAR, you can't resolve. Or you have L-band SAR. So like you can see here, even by microwave, the method is that it is saturating between 150 to 200, but we developed a random forest machine learning where up to 300 we had linearity. Only above 300 tons per hectare we were having the underestimation. So now we looked at the global products, where so many models which are there, they have their own product. But if we compare the global product with Indian data, they heavily underestimate. They are not using Indian data for calibration at all. So that is why this year we have released over 4 sites the biomass map taken by the LiDAR, and we have released it open for people to use in modeling. Okay, so this, now what we did was, in Tripura in 1991, there was 3,000 hectares of rubber. By 2017, 95,000. But the rubber, the problem is, you will call it forest, but once you tap the rubber, entire photosynthesis comes in latex. There is no biomass accumulation. So we tried to create a age-based biomass map of rubber, right? Then there are other issues of soil. You don't see soil. So again, we had a machine learning method to make soil organic carbon and inorganic carbon. Now we are trying to work on a methodology. If the land transformation happens and you have sample point, and if you substitute space for time, so what does machine learning tell you about the carbon change? This is for Kerala, around close to 50 year. We had a lot of method. So there, this is the accuracy of the model. So what we actually demonstrated was, when the forest gets converted to rubber, coconut, annual crop or other plantation, there is a mean decrease of 3 ton, 4 ton, 7 ton and no decrease. And when annual crops, they become rubber or coconut, not much change. But when annual crops become other plantation, there is about 10 ton per hectare soil carbon increase. So by how to convert the land transformation into something which is invisible and do by modeling. Finally, I think we are now getting into the science part. So this is for all botanists. So there will be gross primary productivity, then net primary productivity, then litter fall, right? And then it will go to the soil and by respiration come back. Can you really estimate spatially for whole India and map it? It's a bit tough, but has been done in the world. So we thought we could also do it. So we have using 2 types of observations. One is called eddy covariance. It's a very simple but costly technique. The whole idea is, if I measure by sonic anemometer the eddies, it means it's about 20 hertz. So 20 samples per second. So when the wind comes up, if it is a eddy, it will be a CO2 within the canopy. So the CO2 measurement will dip. So from the eddies I will know the difference of upper CO2 and within the canopy, and then without disturbing canopy, I will from mass flow rate compute what is the rate of absorption. And night it is the rate of respiration, ulta. So we established, in fact, India didn't have a functioning. So but even 2004, India didn't have any flux tower with the data by that time. So NRSC team and our project of NCP, we established in Sundarban, Haldwani plantation, Betul, Sal forest, and many other places later on. And now there are multiple teams in India. So this is how the CO2 flux looks like. This we have is the Betul teak, right? So we are able to compute how much carbon gets accumulated and link it to the weather and model. We also, this is the Sundarban, and Sundarban doesn't have seasonality, but you can see high productivity. Then we looked at the ecological studies and again used data learning methods to create map of the litter fall in Uttarakhand by mapping types and various 6 models and our random forest model. So we exactly know by leaf fall how much carbon comes. Then if you try to put all this information and various methods, you will see most of the time all Indian studies have shown emission. The government numbers are all absorption. So we need to resolve, okay? We believe we have method. So I had a PhD student, your colleague Abha. This is the Abha's PhD work. So we tried to run a bookkeeping model for entire India from 1880, and we showed the 40-ton positive and then very rapid decline after the Supreme Court said in 1980, no further tree cutting. Policies are very important, and we also estimated that in early 2000 we actually had turned into a net absorption. So there is some evidence of the net absorption also. So this was a PhD work of my student. And then globally as of now, if you take global data and took 3 different type of models. So 2 models feel India is emitter, and 1 model which is the HRC 203 which says after 1995 India is a net CO2 absorption, but the numbers are much less. And we have tried to look at alternate methods also. So what we tried to do was run a model of the terrestrial primary productivity, run it every year, driven by remote sensing data, and for each pixel compute net ecosystem productivity, also link it to how much additional will come in the soil, try to add. And then what you do is, if you know what is happening on the land, and if you measure CO2 in the atmosphere, and you have a model of CO2 wind, from here you can invert it, what should be below the inversion, what I said, of the entire earth. So we recently published a paper where saying that this North India grid and South India grid, there is a 150 teragram and 60 teragram absorption. But the issue with this absorption is this is forest and agriculture. You get my point? Because at such a resolution, when you are measuring at 500 kilometer kernel, you are not separating forest and agriculture. You are saying the entire earth mass over India is net absorbing this much. Obviously, we produce 300 million tons of food. So we have to absorb carbon dioxide. Now, how much is this agriculture, should we separate or do? So this actually is a challenge. I will leave it here to say the way ahead is assimilation of forestry data, capture dynamics, more remote sensing, full carbon cycle, more collaboration, creating open data, and use all this data to create policies which are data driven. Otherwise, policies are created by our whims or fancies or what is politically correct, are not generally, they are not data driven policy. So it would be nice to create data driven policy. Thank you. I apologize, I have taken I think 20 minutes extra, but I am all ears for your questions and comments. Thank you.